I know many of you are very anxious to go down the Kim Kardashian rabbit hole. We will get to that very soon. But we need to stick a pin in that and take another look at the baby reindeer. Because the way things are looking, we might have ourselves a barbecue reindeer. Because as more things start to get revealed, many netizens are slowly starting to believe that Fiona Harvey, the real-life Martha, might have actually been defamed. Because where before many people were digging into Martha, now they set their sights on Richard Gadd, desperately trying to find out what he's lying about and exactly what kind of man he is. And the result just might shock you, as Netflix may very well have to come correct with a very proper Christmas gift delivered by a baby reindeer in the way of a huge payout.
Dollar bills, y'all.
Real life is becoming way more interesting than the show itself. You are witnessing Baby Reindeer Season 2 in real time. So whereas the first episode of Season 2 focused on Fiona's words, this episode focused on a lot of people's words in the industry, behind the scenes, and much, much more. By the time we get to the end, I will reveal to you our Hashisa conspiracy theory. And what you will realize is that we may very well be witnessing the biggest defamation suit since Johnny Depp. Who is a producer? This is a question that many netizens, myself included, have been asking. Because throughout the entire Baby Reindeer series, it's very clear that there are at least two people who committed horrible crimes. But the show primarily focuses on Fiona. But very few people seem to care about what Darrien O'Connor, the producer, did to Richard. Spoiler alert, Darrien O'Connor used his power, money, and influence to seduce a young and impressionable Richard Gadd while supplying him with illegal substances, coercing him to participate in a and he did all of this while Richard was unconscious. Shit, if you ask me, this guy sounds like the British version of P. Diddy.
Sir Petersworth III at your service.
But for some reason, Richard didn't out the real-life Darrien. Instead, he outed the real-life Martha. And by the end of the series, Richard eventually agreed to join Darrien's team. So who exactly is this guy? This is the question that everybody is asking right now.
Richard Gadd, who, as you said, did the show in Edinburgh and has been very open to people in the industry about who that person was. So people in the industry know who that person is.
Well, that's the difficulty, you see, the complexity of him having put the material out there before in another format.
And obviously that person has been prosecuted, has never gone to trial, but everyone knows who he is talking about. Now it comes out now and a completely different person is identified, someone who has produced Richard Gadd before, but is definitively not the person in any way. But the person they've cast in that role looks like this other guy, looks like the guy who's been falsely accused. And it's such a weird, bizarre thing to do, because this poor guy is now, but he's had death threats and he's had to issue a statement to say it's not me, and it is not him. It's definitively not, because people in the industry know who it is, and it is
Richard
definitely
Gadd has
not
said
him.
it's not
Yes,
him.
Richard Gadd has said it's not him.
蛮有趣的，因为我有去 IMDb 的网站查他的资料。What I found is that Richard wrote scripts for 3 major networks. Dave, a subsidiary for BBC, which focuses on comedy, Comedy Central, and Netflix. And you have to remember, in the Baby Reindeer series, when Richard joined Darrien's team, the company that Darrien represented was a very large comedy studio. Now, out of the list of that 3, the very obvious ones are Dave and Comedy Central. And which one the real-life Darrien worked for, I think we'll find out pretty soon, as netizens are on that like flies on shit.
Damn right I am.
And once they dig it out, things are about to get very serious, as they will have found the first ingredient to the recipe of reindeer barbecue. And do you remember back in our Whitney Houston episode what Suge Knight said about people with power in the industry?
You guys who got involved with a lot of people who was their mentors, instead of having a guy to mentor your own father, they was having these guys they mentor. And when that happens in the industry, what's done to them, they do to the next person.
Woo! The power that comes with this position is like an infectious disease, yo. And the symptoms include taking advantage of weaker, more impressionable subordinates. And what's about to be revealed is that Richard Gadd himself might have been guilty of the exact same thing. Fun fact, aside from the actress who played Martha in Baby Reindeer, the only other well-known actress was the transgender actress who played Terry, Richard's girlfriend. And what's interesting is how this all came to be. It all started with Richard behind the scenes. Because within a few days of Baby Reindeer going live on Netflix, a trans screenwriter and actress named Reese Lyons posted this on X. In a long thread, Reese goes on to detail how she met Richard at a bar after one of her performances and how he walked up to her and asked to buy her a drink. But before she could refuse a drink from a strange man who she didn't know, Richard had already handed the drink to her. And here's where things get interesting. You see, Reese actually recognized Richard because he had been following her on Instagram. And that's when she put 2 and 2 together and realized realized that him showing up at the bar was not a coincidence. Richard had explained that he wanted to cast Reese as Terry, his ex-girlfriend in the series. So she asked him to get in touch with her agent and they exchanged contact information. And just before he left, he said one last thing. I find you really attractive. So the next day, Reese was sent a script, and upon reading it, she was very impressed. And a week later, Richard contacted her, not for an audition, but for a date. And she accepted with the intent to ask more questions about the script. And Reese even admits that this was bad judgment on her part. After the date, she realized a potential conflict of interest and called Richard to inform him that them dating was not a good idea. And he seemed cool, he said he understood. But then, 2 weeks later, he called her again and asked her out on another date. And Reese was conflicted. If she said no, would she lose the opportunity to be in the Netflix series that could potentially take her career to the next level? Now keep in mind, Richard is the guy who suffered the exact same thing, a toxic and brutal power dynamic at the hands of Darrien. And now a woman 10 years his junior was about to enter into the exact same situation.
Fuck.
After Reese's audition, she got a phone call from Richard, and he said that her audition was really good, but that it was out of his hands because Netflix was looking for someone who was already a star. Now, aside from her disappointment, Reese actually genuinely did like Richard, and now that there was no potential conflict of interest, she asked him if they could continue dating for real. And Richard's response,
it's not going to work. You're too confrontational for me.
and they never spoke again.
应该是假的吧？这个女孩应该是说谎的，对吧？
Here's the thing. This story was actually verified by several news sources. And although Reese's story doesn't name Richard outright, according to one news source, they actually verified that the person in question was Richard Gadd. And here's the thing, I don't think Reese posting something like this had much to gain, because at the time that she did post it, Baby Reindeer hadn't really taken off and become the viral sensation that it is now. Not only that, but she made it explicitly clear that she suffered no abuse at the hands of Richard. But after Baby Reindeer blew up, so did Reese's thread, and Richard soon found himself under a lot of heat. And this prompted the production company of Baby Reindeer to launch an internal investigation in which they questioned every member of their team, including Richard. And eventually they said that they found no wrongdoing and that Richard was cleared of any misconduct. But here's the thing, they interviewed and spoke with everyone except for Reese herself.
Some fuckery's going on.
And just a few days later, Reese posted another thread to X. Since coming forward publicly, I have received private messages from multiple women and other sexual minorities sharing their experiences with this individual. I won't share details to respect their privacy, but I encourage others to come forward if they feel safe to do so. Wow. So out of this entire thread, there are two words that really struck a chord with me. Come forward. Because usually this phrase is associated with one very popular movement. Me Too. And this reminds me of something else that Fiona said in her interview with Piers Morgan.
I think he always wanted this to come out, to persecute someone, to take attention away from him and this allegation. And I just generally think he's got extreme psychiatric problems.
And now it seems like we have the second ingredient for reindeer barbecue. And the third and final ingredient isn't one individual, but an entire entity, Netflix. So we all know that when we watch movies and about true events like Black Hawk Down, usually at the beginning they say inspired by a true story or based on true events, or some of this is true. But Baby Reindeer did something very, very different. They straight up said, this is a true story. And these 5 simple words may very well see Netflix becoming Fiona's real-life baby reindeer. Because it might only be spring, but Christmas is coming early in the form of lots of cash.
Dollar bills, y'all.
And here's one thing you might not know. The actor playing Richard Gadd in the series is actually Richard Gadd himself. So couple this with what they put at the beginning of This Is a True Story, and many of the viewers, myself included, were completely bought in. Like I said before, this is virtually unheard of for films. Usually when someone says this is a true story at the beginning of a film, that's what we call a documentary.
It's true.
But here's where things get really wild, because not only did they say it was a true story at the beginning of the show, but then Netflix sent one of their senior executives to stand before Parliament live and tell them the exact same thing.
And I just wonder what your duty of care rules are in series like that or productions like that. Were you concerned about the characters being identified and the effect that it would have on the characters concerned?
Baby Reindeer is an extraordinary story, and it is obviously a true story of the horrific abuse that the writer and protagonist Richard Gadd suffered at the hands of a convicted stalker. We did take every reasonable precaution in disguising the real-life identities of the people involved in that story in the making of the show.
She's been identified,
while also striking a balance with the veracity and authenticity of Richard's story, because we didn't want to anonymize that or make it generic to the point where it was no longer his story, because that would undermine the intent behind the show.
It was a fascinating story and very disturbing. But I understand that the woman concerned, the Martha in real life, has now been identified. So presumably this will have quite a significant impact on her life, she said, and is now contemplating legal action, I understand, because of the effect it's had on her life. And I just wondered what your thought process was about her and the effect that this would have on her, because obviously somebody who's impacted by quite serious mental health problems.
Well, Richard Gadd was very clear that was not the intent of the show, that it should inspire people to try and track down the sort of real life individuals. Ultimately, it's obviously very difficult to control what viewers do, particularly in a world where everything is amplified by social media. But fundamentally, this was about Richard's story and telling Richard's story in a truthful way. I personally wouldn't be comfortable with a world in which we decided it was better that Richard was silenced and not allowed to tell his story. So obviously, we are following the situation very closely.
Did you offer any contact or support for the Martha character in real life?
I'll not get into the specifics of what happened around the making of the show, because it wouldn't be appropriate for me to comment, and I don't want to give further fuel to some of the theories which are circling on the internet.
So this testimony reveals three very important things. Firstly, Netflix knew exactly who Martha was in real life, Fiona Harvey. Secondly, Netflix did not consider the impact that it would have on Fiona's real life. And third, and most importantly, Netflix did not even consider Fiona's opinion, as they didn't even consult with her. So I think it's safe to assume that they unilaterally believe all of what Richard said in his story. And remember what was revealed in the previous chapter. The production company, which was hired by Netflix, when they launched their internal investigation, they didn't even bother to contact Reese Lyons, who wrote the thread on X. Oh, and then there's the other thing. You remember in the series where Martha went to jail and there was this whole court hearing and this trial and she eventually got convicted? Well, according to Fiona, none of that ever happened.
There's one key point in the drama that has Martha's character pleading guilty to intimidating Richard Gadd in court and sentenced to 9 months prison time. But the fundamental point of this is, did you take part in that? So did you go to jail? Did you have a trial?
Of course not. Of course not.
Have you ever been to prison?
No.
Have you ever been charged with a criminal offence?
No.
Never?
No.
Nothing?
Nothing.
So that scene is completely invented.
That's completely false.
But that's a fundamental point here, because if they basically have a key point in their drama, which they say is a true story, which involves you admitting to intimidating Richard Gadd and getting a 9-month prison sentence, and that is completely untrue.
That's completely untrue. Very, very defamatory to me. Very career damaging. And I wanted to rebut that completely on this show. I'm not a stalker. I've not been to jail. I've not got injunctions, interdicts. This is just complete nonsense. But you'll know yourself, if you're charged with a criminal offence, it will go fine, bigger fine, whatever. Very few people go to jail.
Well, you'd have a police record.
Nowadays.
Yeah. Your maiden name when you were born was...
Yeah, that's right.
Was
Muir, yes.
Muir Harvey.
Yeah.
So that's quite an unusual name.
Yeah.
So if you'd ever received a criminal conviction for anything, it would be on police files.
Yes.
And what you're saying is you've never been even charged with an offence.
No.
Let alone the one that they...
Yes, this is 9.5 months in jail is pretty serious.
Now, let's be real for a second. Many of the people who spent 210 minutes watching the Baby Reindeer series, by the time they got to the end and saw Martha in real life, their minds were already made up. The prejudice was already burnt in. Martha was bad news. Shit, take a look at the comments under our video and even under Pierce's original video, and you will see that the overwhelming consensus is that Fiona is a complete nut job, and Richard is the victim. And in Piers Morgan's follow-up video to his interview, a lawyer revealed something very interesting.
England has, to my mind, much better rules when it comes to defamation. But having said that, and as somebody who is currently adverse to Netflix, I will tell you, in my experience at least, they do tend to take great liberties when they represent what the particular facts are. And specifically in America, you have a doctrine, both defamation by implication, defamation per se, the accusing her of being a criminal, and kind of doubling down on it by saying she served time. If that is not true, she's got a whale of a case.
I think so.
It's almost inexplicable that they would allow an executive to go and testify, that they would then have this as a central feature of the series, and then would just concoct this. I mean, I'm dealing with now, and I've dealt with in the past, their legal department, and it's about as robust as you can get. So both their in-house counsel and their outside counsel. So a lot of this does not make sense to me, or has some kind of, there's something peculiar going on. Even her reaction, though, to watching that seemed just a wee bit peculiar to me as well. There seems to be something that is there that we haven't discovered yet, and that the truth has not come out here in terms of what actually happened, because I cannot believe Netflix and their legal team has let this go this far.
This guy ain't no random spare, yo. He actually represented Michael Jackson before his death. Not only that, but he most recently represented an actress who sued Netflix for unfair employment practices. Needless to say, this guy knows shit. And the funny thing is, while we're in the middle of writing copy for this episode, Piers Morgan uploaded another video, and in that, he had another lawyer who revealed that this lawsuit was now green lit.
And the problem with presenting something as truth when it is untrue, and would be knowingly untrue, to Mr. Gadd, the creator of the program and of the script. The problem with that is that if the person involved is readily identifiable, as here, as Fiona Harvey clearly is, then that person has a legitimate grievance. And I've spoken to her today, as you say, and she rightly feels extremely aggrieved at what's happened to her and her reputation.
You spoke to Fiona. As a result of that, will you be taking her case up?
I'm in discussions now with a law firm in London with a view to taking the case forward. Netflix have chosen to make vast money, huge amounts of money, from promoting this program as being a true story. And they have done so without telling the public whether in fact, now that Fiona Harvey has challenged them on that key detail of her being a quote-unquote convicted stalker who was sent to prison repeatedly and multiple times, sent to prison is the allegation made within the program. Before and after Richard Gadd, she was supposedly previously convicted and imprisoned, and then pleaded guilty and imprisoned again, according to the program. Netflix have not come out and said one way or the other whether they are standing by that allegation that she is a convicted stalker with a criminal record who's been to prison or not. If it turns out, as a result of our inquiries into her criminal record background, that she has no criminal record, Netflix will have a legal case.
Now, some of you might be wondering, what about creative freedom? You have to remember, Netflix already sent one of their top guys to stand before Parliament and testify that it was all true after the blowback. But bruh, you guys went through this entire production process without even contacting the subject of your entire series? 你们是驯鹿宝贝还是驯鹿白痴?
You are so dumb. You are really dumb. For real.
So now, the recipe for 驯鹿烤肉 is complete. 接下来呢, we have our 好机车 conspiracy theory. This is not a true story. Everything I'm about to say is completely made up and conspiracy theory. See, Netflix, if you'd have said it like this, then you might not find yourself in the precarious position where you might have to deliver presents to Fiona this Christmas via baby reindeer. So before we get started, I must state that throughout this entire scandal, there is no good guy or bad guy, only someone who tells more and better lies.
Goddamn right.
So Martha in the Baby Reindeer series is a very unstable personality. She's prone to outbursts, some of them violent, and she very easily gets triggered by things that she doesn't like to hear. The result of this is her stalking, harassing, and attacking Richard and his girlfriend. But here's the thing, what I saw in the Piers Morgan interview was not someone who was emotionally unstable and prone to outbursts. What I saw was someone who was calm and collected, and although somewhat antisocial in nature, for the most part, she seems very good at hiding her true emotions. Even Piers Morgan said this himself.
I found her to be intelligent, coherent, combative, and quick thinking. And on a human level, I felt sorry for her that she's become the object of global ridicule and, as she says, the recipient of serious death threats. But there were plenty of moments in the interview that rang alarm bells to me, moments where I think she was frankly lying.
So, 有可能 Richard's portrayal of Fiona in the Baby Reindeer series is completely exaggerated. Now don't get it twisted. What we saw in Pierce's interview was someone who is overconfident, narcissistic, and who displays some very flawed logic. But that doesn't mean that everything she says is a lie. And Richard is someone who comes from a very messed up past. And in spite of him suffering and being horribly violated at the hands of someone in the entertainment industry, he still proceeds to move forward and hopes to get more opportunities within the same entertainment industry. And as a result of this, Richard actually enables the person who violated him to keep doing what they're doing to other future prospects. And to me, this is a very serious lie. So, 有可能 Fiona is a very narcissistic, boastful, and controlling lawyer who eventually crosses paths with Richard, who's pretty full of himself, very good at making up stories, and enjoys a bit of flattery. And upon meeting, both of them saw something that they wanted from each other. And as a result, they both became victim of each other's lies and deceit. So Fiona, feeling slighted, got a little bit carried away, maybe very carried away, carried out some low-level harassment at Richard's expense, and Richard's response is to try to get her sent to jail. But all the court is willing to offer him is a restraining order against Fiona. But this is not enough, so he sets out to get his revenge. So, upon creating the Baby Reindeer series, he leaves a lot of very obvious clues, as well as casting someone who very closely resembles Fiona in real life, thus allowing netizens to very quickly seek out the real-life Fiona. And Richard knew that the only way he was going to be able to sell this script to Netflix was to exaggerate a lot of shit. He had to make that shit little sudden. And it worked. Netflix completely bought into his story. This is where Netflix messed up real bad. They didn't even bother to fact check this fool. They didn't even bother to get in contact with the subject of this series to make sure that what he was saying was true. This resulted in Baby Reindeer becoming the biggest defamation scandal in Netflix's history. 有可能 anyway. So now I'm going to predict what could possibly happen. Fiona will sue Netflix and she'll demand an open trial, very similar to what happened with Johnny Depp and Amber Heard. And Baby Reindeer Season 2 will play out in open court, live for everyone to see in real time. And Netflix will either lose or settle out of court because they can't produce 41,000 emails, let alone 350 voice messages. And then Richard Gadd will catch his own lawsuits at the hands of the various women who he allegedly mistreated and abused, kicking off the British version of the P. Diddy scandal, turning the BBC into BBQ and the 驯鹿宝贝 into 驯鹿烤肉。烧焦味哦。
Barbecue, huh? How do you like your ribs?
But hey, maybe I'm wrong, but you have to admit, this is 精彩 as Who knows, maybe they actually will produce the 41,000 emails or the 350 voice messages. Or maybe they ain't got that shit at all. But let me know what you think down below. Remember to like, comment, subscribe, share this video with your friends, and we will see you on the flip side. Peace!